I hid my cancer and kept my illness a secret to support my son. One day, I trembled when I heard my boss call my name. I remember that morning as if it were yesterday, standing in my kitchen, preparing breakfast for my son Brian. It was just like any other morning, but for me, a new challenge was waiting. It was my first day at the local university, and my heart was racing with a mix of excitement and fear. As I stirred the pancake batter, my mind was elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of how I'd hide my illness in this new workplace. Cancer had been my heaviest secret for years, weighing on me like an invisible burden. I knew that revealing this truth could jeopardize the stability I'd worked so hard to achieve for Brian and myself. As I served Brian his breakfast, I mentally went through my morning routine, double-checking that I'd taken all my medications and packed everything I needed for the day. I must have looked worried because Brian, with his ever-observant eyes, asked me if I was okay. It was as if he could sense the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. I put on my bravest face and assured him that everyone gets a little nervous on their first day. I knelt beside him, gently smoothing his hair, feeling its softness beneath my fingers. I reminded him that what truly matters is that we're together, and that I'd always be there for him, no matter what. Brian, my little warrior, looked at me with such determination in his eyes. He told me he wanted to grow up strong like me, to help with everything. I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine, and whispered that he was already strong. Together, I told him, we were invincible. After making sure Brian had everything he needed for school, I closed the front door with a heavy sigh. I walked towards the morning sunlight, heading for the bus stop, each step feeling like a small victory. On the bus, my mind drifted to memories of the past, memories that still had the power to take my breath away. I remembered the night my beloved husband was tragically taken from our lives. It was a rainy evening, and the news of the car accident hit me like a physical blow, leaving me stunned and lost. Brian was only 3 then, too young to understand why Daddy would never come home again. I was forced to raise our son alone, carrying an emptiness that seemed impossible to fill. And then, as if life hadn't dealt me enough blows, I received my cancer diagnosis. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. After being crushed by heartache, I now had to battle a disease that threatened to take me away from Brian too. Every time I found a new job, my health status would somehow come to light, and I'd be let go. The fear of it happening again was a constant companion. Looking out the bus window, I wondered if I'd ever find a place that would accept me as I am. This university job was my chance for a fresh start, a way to prove to myself and to Brian that we could have a stable life. I tried to convince myself that maybe this time would be different, clinging to that hope like a lifeline. As the bus reached its destination, I stepped off with a renewed sense of purpose. Walking towards the university, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. One day at a time, I reminded myself, that's our path to victory. It was like a mantra, helping me focus on the present rather than getting overwhelmed by the future. As I passed through the university gates, I headed straight for the administration building. My heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and nerves, like a schoolgirl on her first day. There, waiting for me, was Professor Jerry, a middle-aged man with a warm smile that instantly melted away some of my anxiety. He welcomed me to the university, his enthusiasm genuine and infectious. He said he was delighted to have me and believed I would make significant contributions to their library. As he extended his hand, I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't expected. I was touched and surprised by the warmth of his welcome, so different from the cold professionalism I'd encountered in other jobs. I managed to respond, thanking him for the opportunity, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions I was feeling. I told him I was eager to begin, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Professor Jerry then began to outline my responsibilities. He explained that I would be in charge of organizing books, assisting students, and managing returns and checkouts. His words painted a picture of a bustling, vital place at the heart of academic life. As he spoke about the importance of the library to students and faculty, I felt the weight of the responsibility settling on my shoulders. I listened carefully, committing every detail to memory, determined to excel in my role. After our conversation, Professor Jerry led me to the library. The moment I stepped inside, I was awestruck. It was a grand building, filled with the quiet of learning and the whisper of countless pages. A sense of peace washed over me instantly, as if I'd found a sanctuary. The scent of paper and ink was like a soothing balm, calming my lingering anxieties. "This is where you'll be spending most of your time," Professor Jerry said, and I couldn't help but smile. My first day passed more smoothly than I could have imagined. I helped students with various requests, from finding specific books to teaching them how to use the catalog system. Each "thank you" I received felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was making a difference. The students were mostly polite and respectful, making my first day enjoyable and fulfilling. It reminded me of my own college days, long ago, when the library was my refuge. However, my peaceful day was marked by an unexpected encounter. As I was about to leave for lunch, a man rushed across the library entrance, cutting off my path. The urgency on his face was clear, and he immediately addressed me. He asked if I could help him, explaining he was a medical student in need of a book. As he caught his breath, I noticed he didn't look like the typical young student who frequented the library. He appeared to be around 35, perhaps in an advanced stage of his education or returning to studies. He introduced himself as William, a final-year medical student. He explained he urgently needed a book on cardiac surgical techniques for an upcoming exam. The anxiety in his voice was palpable, reminding me of my own struggles and determination. Despite his desperation, I felt compelled to help. I told him we'd figure it out, putting my own break on hold. Together, we used the library's search system to locate the book. Once we found it, he grabbed it with heartfelt thanks and rushed off. As I watched him go, I couldn't help but feel a connection to his determination and urgency. It was a reminder of why I was here, of the difference I could make in these students' lives. But that wasn't the last unexpected encounter with William. As I was closing up the library at the end of the day, I heard hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway. I turned to see William, the medical student, running towards me with a book clutched tightly in his arms. He apologized for bothering me again, explaining that he knew it was closing time but he had to return the book. I glanced at the wall clock, hesitating. We were already past closing time, and after a long day, I was eager to get home to Brian. I started to tell William that I really should refuse, as we were past hours. My voice was firm, but I couldn't help feeling sympathy for the earnest student before me. William sensed my hesitation and quickly explained his situation. There had been an emergency at the hospital where he volunteered in the ER. He'd been caught up in an urgent surgery case and couldn't leave until everything was stable. He didn't want to pay the late fee, which would amount to the full price of the book. I felt a mix of surprise and admiration for William's dedication. I knew how expensive medical textbooks could be, and I understood the importance of his volunteer work. Despite my desire to stick to the rules and procedures, my humanity spoke louder. I told William I understood and would make an exception this time. As I unlocked the door and gestured for him to come in, I felt a small thrill of breaking the rules for a good cause. For the next few days after that last interaction with William, I didn't see him again. But as I settled into the rhythm of the library, I got to know many of the students and professors. Each of them brought their own stories and challenges to this place of learning. I began to feel like a part of this community, and it filled me with a subtle yet profound joy. I adapted to my new environment surprisingly quickly, feeling at home among the shelves and quiet study areas. As I organized books, my mind would wander. I found myself thinking, what if I could stay here forever, without worrying about anything else? Being part of this community and helping these young people on their academic journeys felt more rewarding than I had ever imagined. I longed for that normalcy, for a chance to be free from the ever-present shadow of anxiety about my health. Every decision I made at work was underpinned by thoughts of my condition. I wondered if there would ever come a day when I could act on my feelings without measuring the effort, just like everyone else. My health concerns were a constant reminder of my vulnerability, but also of my strength. I had stayed strong for Brian, found a job I loved, and now I was allowing myself to dream of a future I hadn't dared imagine before. It had seemed out of reach, but here I was, making a difference. Surely there was value in feeling useful, wasn't there? I smiled to myself, remembering the faces of the students I'd helped and the conversations with professors. Despite the challenges I faced daily, I had found a place where I felt valued. Here, my contributions went beyond my medical condition. It reminded me that, despite everything, I had so much to be grateful for and so many reasons to keep fighting each morning. That day, I returned home exhausted, but a gentle smile still graced my face. I was looking forward to seeing my son, who always greeted me with the energy and joy of a child. As I opened the door, Brian came running towards me with his arms wide open, asking how my day had been. I answered, "I'm home," and embraced him with all the love in the world. "Today was wonderful," I began, settling onto the sofa with Brian eagerly listening beside me. His eyes shone with pride for his mother, a sight that never failed to warm my heart. I told him how happy I felt at work, how I was making a difference there, and how that made me feel so fulfilled. Brian's face lit up with a broad smile as he told me he always knew I was amazing. He wanted to know everything about my day, showing the same interest and admiration for my strength and determination that he always had. As I was recounting the day's achievements and challenges, I suddenly felt short of breath. At first, I tried to hide it, not wanting to worry Brian. But a sharp pain in my chest stopped me mid-sentence. I placed my hand on my chest, trying to steady my breathing. I could feel the color draining from my face. Brian, ever perceptive, asked if I was okay, his voice laced with concern. He moved closer to me, his worried eyes searching my face. I saw the fear in my son's eyes and did my best to reassure him. "I'm fine," I said, attempting a smile while still struggling to catch my breath. "I just need a moment." After a few tense minutes, my breathing returned to normal, and the chest pain subsided. I kept my eyes on Brian, who was still watching me with a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. "See? I'm feeling better already," I said, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "There's no need to worry. Remember, Mommy is strong." Brian nodded, still looking a bit worried, and gave me a tight hug. He whispered that he just wanted me to always be okay, and my heart melted at my son's love and concern. These moments were becoming more frequent. It was the result of lack of treatment, but apart from the occasional bout of illness, I had no other special incidents. My work routine remained peaceful. It was on a Friday when it happened again. I was about to close the library when William suddenly appeared, rushing towards me. His expression told me he needed help once more. He apologized profusely, explaining he didn't want to bother me again, but he needed a book for a report due Monday. I could see he was uncomfortable being in this situation again. For a moment, I felt a flash of anger. I had been looking forward to ending the week and spending some time with Brian and myself. But when I saw William's sad face, my initial irritation melted into reluctant sympathy. I couldn't help but tease him a little, asking if this was becoming a habit. William explained, with a mix of sincerity and a hint of desperation, that he had been caught up in a meeting about advancements in cardiovascular disease treatments. He couldn't miss it, he said. Sighing, I decided to help him again and started looking for the book he needed. As we walked through the library aisles, my curiosity got the better of me. I asked him if his routine was always this busy while inputting the search into the system. William nodded with a tired smile. He told me about his packed schedule, juggling classes, hospital shifts, and studying. He was trying to make the most of his medical training, he said, which meant seizing every learning opportunity. His voice was full of passion for medicine, but I could also sense the weight of his routine. I found myself impressed by William's dedication, but also worried about the stress he was facing. As I handed him the book he was looking for, I gently advised him to take care of himself. I told him there was no point in saving lives if he destroyed himself in the process. William agreed with me as he took the book. He admitted that sometimes he felt so close to his goal that he forgot to slow down. As he thanked me, his eyes shining with gratitude, I found myself reflecting on our conversation. I was beginning to feel a growing fondness for William. While I respected his dedication, our interactions also made me think about my own life. It made me ponder the importance of finding a balance between pursuing dreams and taking care of oneself. These encounters weren't daily occurrences, but they became frequent throughout the week. After a while, I noticed a pattern in William's behavior. He always arrived in a rush, just a few minutes after closing time. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, then maybe intentional. But now, it seemed almost like a routine. One Friday, determined not to be caught off guard by the students' constant rush, I decided to wait an extra 10 minutes after closing time. As I was organizing some books, William appeared right on cue. This time, however, he stopped abruptly, surprised to see the library still open. "What's going on? Did I make it on time today?" William asked, confusion and hope mingling in his voice. I watched as he glanced around the nearly empty library before his eyes settled on me. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound softly echoing between the bookshelves. As I closed the book in my hands, I told him that he wasn't always late, but I had decided to wait this time. I added, with a touch of playful challenge, that I'd treat him to lunch the day he arrived on time. William's face flushed slightly, a mix of embarrassment and gratitude crossing his features. He told me I was kind and expressed his deep appreciation, apologizing for the trouble he'd caused. There was a note of regret in his voice that I hadn't expected. He reminded me of what he'd said before, about his time being extremely limited. He explained that even when he tried to plan, he always felt like he was racing against the clock. The sincerity in his voice and the tired expression on his face touched my heart. I found myself even more impressed by this student's dedication. As William searched for the book he needed for Monday's assignment, I pondered his commitment to his studies and his future. It was rare to see someone so devoted, and I felt an increasing sense of fondness and respect for him. As I handed him the book, I told William that since he was doing important work, I'd be happy to wait a few minutes after closing if it would help him. William looked at me, his eyes shining with gratitude. He thanked me profusely, his appreciation evident in every word. In that simple, sincere exchange, there was a moment of mutual recognition of respect and support. I realized I wasn't just helping a struggling student. In my own way, I was contributing to the dreams and aspirations of someone striving towards their goals every day. For me, it was worth those extra minutes in the library. As the weeks progressed, the university library became the stage for near-daily encounters between William and me. His visits were always running late, and an unexpected friendship began to blossom between me, the librarian, and him, the medical student. I grew accustomed to waiting a few minutes after closing time, anticipating William's arrival. It was like waiting for him with a mixture of resignation and affection. A comfortable routine had developed between us, shaped by brief but meaningful conversations. However, one day, that routine was unexpectedly broken. That day, William entered the library on time, with a calmness and smile that contrasted sharply with his usual rushed arrivals. I was busy organizing recently returned books, but I looked up to see him approaching. My first thought was that he might have mistaken the time. However, a quick glance at the clock confirmed that wasn't the case. William was actually on time. I couldn't help but tease him, saying with a hint of surprise that someone must have finally taught him how to use a clock. I joked that I'd have to mark this day on the calendar. William laughed, his face beaming with bright joy. He playfully reminded me not to forget our agreement, saying he'd come to collect on the lunch I'd promised. His eyes sparkled with mischief as he spoke. Impressed by his change, I smiled. I admitted that I really would have to treat him to lunch, but first, I asked what book he was looking for. As I headed towards the computer, William started explaining the book he needed. While he talked, I couldn't help but reflect on how our relationship had evolved. What had started as mere professional interactions had now transformed into a friendship, complete with bets and promised lunches. It struck me as curious how time and circumstances can bring people together. I felt a quiet gratitude for this unexpected personal connection, especially at a time when my own life seemed dominated by worries and personal challenges. After finding the book William needed, I logged off the computer and turned to him. With friendly warmth, I asked when he wanted to have that lunch he'd won. William suggested the next day, and I agreed. I found myself oddly excited at the prospect. It wasn't just about the lunch, it was the realization that I'd formed a genuine friendship in a place where I never expected to find more than just work. The next day at lunchtime, I stood in front of the library. A light morning breeze brought a pleasant warmth, reminding me of countless spring days from my youth. I found myself glancing at my watch occasionally, a smile of anticipation playing on my lips. When William finally appeared, a few minutes late, his expression was a mix of hurry and embarrassment. I couldn't resist teasing him again, joking that he couldn't manage to be on time even for a free lunch. My words seemed to lighten the mood. William laughed sheepishly, but he looked happy to be there. He apologized, explaining that the morning had been busier than he'd expected. But he assured me it would be worth it, mentioning a great restaurant nearby. With that, he led me off campus, and I felt a flutter of excitement, like a schoolgirl on her first date. As we walked, I seized the opportunity to get to know William better. I asked him about his life, curious to learn more about this library regular who had become such a friendly presence. William began to share his story, revealing much about his motivations and challenges. He told me about his family, describing them as emotional, especially his father. His father, William explained, had fixed ideas about success and was very strict about how to achieve goals. He said his father always demanded a lot from him. In the midst of that pressure, William felt that his path was to help people directly through medicine. I listened carefully, my heart warming to William's courage in pursuing his passion despite family pressure. It reminded me of my own struggles, though different, in carving out a life for Brian and myself. William continued, saying that leaving home was the hardest decision he'd ever made, but also the most liberating. He admitted that at first, it was difficult to focus on his studies while becoming financially independent. But he knew it was the right path for him. As he spoke, he seemed to be gazing into the distance, reliving each moment of his journey. William's determination to live his own life, defying his father's overbearing expectations, touched me deeply. While I might not have shared the exact same experience, I understood the value of independence and the courage it takes to forge your own path. From the bottom of my heart, I told William he had made a brave choice. I added that it was wonderful to see someone fighting for their dreams. A few minutes later, we arrived at the restaurant. As we sat down, William and I chose dishes to share. That simple decision seemed to symbolize the growing friendship between us. The conversation flowed naturally, starting with light topics and moving to laughter and exchanges about our studies and work. Then, with a serious interest gleaming in his eyes, William asked me to share more of my own story. I hesitated, feeling anxious about revealing my condition to a recent acquaintance. With a slightly uncertain smile, I tried to deflect, saying there wasn't much to tell and that my life was quite ordinary. But William saw through it. He gently chided me, saying everyone has a story worth telling and that I shouldn't think my story wasn't interesting. The sincerity in his voice gave me the courage to open up. I thought for a moment, my face clearly showing my inner conflict. The trust I had built with William was real, but I was weighed down by fears of being seen differently, judged, or even fired again if my condition became known. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw not just curiosity, but an offer of quiet support and understanding. I took a deep breath and decided to trust William. "Okay, I'll tell you," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "but this isn't something I share with many people." With a shaky voice, I told him about losing my husband. I spoke about the responsibility of raising Brian alone, and then, hesitating a bit, I mentioned my cancer diagnosis. I explained how the illness had changed my perspective on life, my fears and hopes, and why I was working so hard. I was careful not to reveal everything, avoiding details that might compromise my privacy or job security. William listened attentively, his face showing unwavering empathy and support. When I finished speaking, I noticed tears in his eyes. They weren't tears of pity, but of respect for my strength and endurance. He told me that my story was one of the most amazing he'd ever heard. He said my strength and determination were truly inspiring. As he thanked me for trusting him enough to share this, he briefly covered my hand with his, showing solidarity. With a mix of concern and curiosity, William asked how I was managing my treatment. He wanted to know how I was taking care of myself, wondering if it was difficult to balance work and treatment. I felt a wave of tension at his question. The reality of my treatment wasn't as simple or comprehensive as I could admit without fully revealing my situation at the university. "I'm managing," I replied, trying to conjure up a believable smile. "I'm taking care of myself as best I can." William expressed admiration for the university hiring me despite knowing about my illness, praising their attitude. I felt my heart constrict at his assumption. "I'm really fortunate," I agreed, maintaining the lie. I asked him not to tell anyone, explaining that I wanted to keep my condition private. I didn't want that kind of attention from others. He seemed a bit surprised, but respected my wishes. He assured me not to worry, saying he'd keep my story close to his heart. I knew his sincerity was genuine. Despite William's assurances, I felt uncomfortable for the rest of lunch. The lie, though small and meant to protect my position and privacy, weighed heavily on my conscience. I valued honesty and truthfulness, and felt guilty about bending the truth, even for a good reason. The conversation moved to lighter topics, but the thought of deceiving William lingered in my mind. I wondered if there would ever come a time when I could be completely honest about my situation. In the meantime, I consoled myself with the thought that I had done what was necessary to protect not just my job, but the stability I'd worked so hard to provide for Brian. Yet, the shadow of that small lie remained in my heart. It was a reminder of the weight that truth sometimes carries. As I headed home after lunch with William, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in a long time. The sensation of sharing my worries and fears with someone, without being judged, was comforting. When I entered the house, Brian came running to greet me, enveloping me in a warm hug. "Mom, welcome home," he exclaimed, his voice brimming with joy. As Brian pulled away from our hug, he noticed an unusual smile on my face. His eyes, bright with curiosity and surprise, sparkled as he asked why I was smiling so much and if something good had happened. I was taken aback by my son's keen observation, feeling a touch of embarrassment. "Oh, it was just a really good day," I replied, trying to keep my answer simple and straightforward. "It's nice when things seem to be going well, isn't it?" But Brian, with his childlike innocence and persistence, wasn't satisfied with such a vague answer. He pressed on, his curiosity sharpening each word as he asked if I'd met someone, who it was, and if they were nice. I couldn't help but laugh at my son's tenacity, impressed by his determination. I told him that yes, I'd met a friend today, a colleague who was very kind and enjoyable to talk to. I tried to convey the simplicity of the encounter without diminishing its importance. Brian mulled over this information for a moment before a mischievous grin spread across his face. He said it was good that I had a friend, reminding me that I always said making friends was important. His expression softened as he continued, saying he was happy that someone was making me smile, since I was always taking care of everyone else. His words warmed my heart. To me, Brian's ability to find joy in my happiness, even in small things, was a reminder of the unconditional love we shared. I thanked him, telling him that his happiness was what mattered most to me, and hugged him again. In that moment, William's presence and quiet support felt like a pillar in my life. It reminded me that even with challenges, there were reasons to smile and be grateful. But this happiness was soon to be interrupted. The next morning at the library started as usual for me. I was engrossed in organizing books, thinking about the enjoyable lunch with William and the warm support from my son. That's when the quiet moment was broken. The university's principal, Professor Jerry, appeared at the library entrance with a serious expression. He immediately called me for a conversation. The walk to his office felt endless, each step adding weight to my heart. As I entered the principal's office, I could feel the tension in the air. Professor Jerry closed the door and asked me to sit, his voice lacking its usual warmth. My heart sank as he began to speak, telling me bluntly that they had learned about my health condition and the fact that I had omitted this information during my hiring. His expression was stern, and I felt a chill run down my spine. My heart was racing, and panic engulfed me. Since starting at the university, I dreaded this moment, but now that it was real, I felt utterly unprepared. I didn't want my condition to affect my employment, I explained, my voice trembling with emotion. I can really work. I can do this. But Professor Jerry remained calm. He said he understood that I believed that, but the issue was trust. By omitting important information, I had betrayed that trust. He told me that unfortunately, they couldn't cover my absence that day. I was to work until the end of the day, but I shouldn't come back tomorrow. I was to consider myself fired. Tears welled up in my eyes as I pleaded with him. "Please, isn't there anything we can do? Any way to fix this? I need this job. Not just for me, but for my son," I said, desperation seeping into every word. The principal was clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but he didn't change his decision. He apologized but said the decision had been made. The university needed to maintain transparency and trust among all employees and students. There was nothing more for me to say. The meeting ended coldly and formally, leaving me alone to face my situation. Unemployed, fearing for the future and the stability I'd worked so hard to build for myself and my son. After the shocking conversation with the principal, I returned to the library, desperately trying to keep my composure. Every book I touched, every shelf I organized seemed to remind me that this was my last day here. My passion for the job, knowing it would soon be just a memory, became a source of pain. When the clock showed it was lunchtime, William appeared, running as usual. But his smile quickly faded when he saw the gloomy expression on my face. He asked me what had happened, his voice laced with concern. The recent pain and shock, mixed with a sense of betrayed trust, led me to jump to a hasty conclusion. "It was you, wasn't it? You told the principal about my illness," I accused him, my voice rising with a tremor of anger and despair. My heart was caught up in the pain of losing my job, and logic and reason were temporarily overshadowed by feelings of betrayal. William stepped back in surprise, looking confused by the accusation. He asked me what I was talking about, insisting he hadn't said anything to anyone. He looked truly puzzled, his face showing both confusion and worry. But I was beyond consolation. My pain had turned to anger, and I continued, "I trusted you. How could you do this?" Each of my words was filled with accusation. At that moment, I couldn't see anything beyond my own pain. The idea that William had betrayed my trust seemed like the only explanation. William kept his composure, his voice firm yet gentle, trying to cut through the fog of emotions I was experiencing. He begged me to talk about this, swearing he hadn't said anything. He insisted something must have happened, but he wasn't responsible. He pleaded with me to tell him what had happened. His assertion was calm yet convincing. William persistently provided a stable point of support in the emotional storm I was experiencing. His calm persuasion gradually softened my initial anger, replacing it with a deep sense of fatigue. It was hard to believe that in an educational institution, a place of knowledge and understanding, my health could be the reason for dismissal. William declared that this couldn't be allowed to happen, that we couldn't just let it slide. Every word he spoke was filled with determination. I was touched by William's readiness to fight for me, but I feared the retaliation he might face on my behalf. I pleaded with him not to do anything, telling him I didn't want him to get hurt for my sake. My voice trembled, reflecting my weakened emotional state as I explained that dealing with my own situation was already difficult enough, let alone worrying about him too. But William was resolute. He argued that he couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. He insisted that I was a valuable member of this community and that my health condition didn't change that. As he started walking towards the principal's office, his stride was filled with a sense of purpose I'd rarely seen in him. I tried to stop him while simultaneously bracing myself for the possible consequences of his actions. I made one last attempt, begging him to think it through, reminding him that he had a career and a future, and not to risk everything for me. But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. When we reached the principal's office door, William knocked firmly without hesitation. The act symbolized his determination not to be ignored. I stayed behind, my heart pounding, fearing what was about to unfold and the potential consequences William might face for his courage. As we were invited in, tension filled the air between the three of us. William began to speak, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. He told Professor Jerry that he knew I had been fired because of my health condition, and that this wasn't just unfair, but illegal. His voice was strong and full of belief as he explained that denying someone the right to work based on their health was a direct violation of basic human rights and could constitute discrimination. Professor Jerry, though surprised by the sudden interruption and accusation, tried to maintain his composure. He told William that while he understood his concern, this was a complex issue. He insisted the decision hadn't been made lightly and that there had been considerations about my long-term ability to perform my duties. William didn't back down. He pointed out that my abilities had never been questioned until my health condition became public knowledge. He argued that this looked exactly like discrimination. Then, he mentioned that his father was a quite influential businessman and his uncle was a prominent lawyer. He said he wouldn't hesitate to seek legal advice about this situation. The weight of William's family names being involved, especially the threat of legal proceedings, seemed to make Professor Jerry reconsider his stance. He admitted that it wouldn't benefit anyone to make this public. He assured us that the university valued equality and fairness, and promised to re-evaluate my situation. Standing a step behind, watching the situation unfold, I felt a mix of gratitude and fear. I was thankful that William was defending me so passionately, but I was also anxious about the consequences of his actions. William concluded by asking Professor Jerry to consider not just the legal implications, but also the moral impact of his decision. He argued that the university should be a model of inclusion and support, not exclusion. His persuasive words carried the determination not to back down easily. The principal, looking worried about the potential outcomes of this situation, promised to review the decision and discuss it further with the board of directors. As William and I left the room, a sense of temporary victory enveloped us, but we both knew my battle was far from over. After the tense meeting with the principal, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety pulsing in my chest. I turned to William, my eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done, William," I said, my voice quivering. "You really saved my situation here." At that moment, my gratitude towards him was immeasurable, but simultaneously an unexpected weakness crept into my body. My heart was racing, pounding like a drum against my ribs. William flashed a warm, sincere smile and told me he couldn't have just stood by and done nothing. He said he couldn't witness injustice and remain silent. With a voice full of conviction, he told me I was a wonderful person who deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. However, his smile faded as he noticed my face gradually turning pale. I tried to smile back, to convey my gratitude, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I began, but my words were cut short by an overwhelming dizziness. I grabbed William's arm for support, feeling like a ship lost at sea, desperately clinging to an anchor. My breathing became shallow, each breath a struggle. It felt as if the room was spinning around me, the floor beneath my feet suddenly unstable. The stress of the day, the emotional roller coaster I'd been on, it all seemed to crash down on me at once. I could hear William's voice, concern evident in his tone, but it sounded distant, as if coming from the end of a long tunnel. My vision started to blur, dark spots dancing at the edges. I tried to focus on William's face, to anchor myself to reality, but the world around me was fading fast. My last conscious thought was a mix of gratitude for William's support and fear of what was happening to me. I felt the world spinning around me, and then everything went dark. The stress and tension of recent events had finally taken their toll on my body, and I passed out. Later, William recounted how he had reacted swiftly, his voice filled with concern as he asked me if I was all right. But before I could answer, my legs gave way, and I slumped against him. I can only imagine the panic William must have felt as he held me up, calling for help while trying to keep me safe. When I regained consciousness, hours later, the soft light of the hospital room enveloped me, causing a brief moment of confusion. William was sitting by my bedside, his face etched with worry, but relief washed over him as he saw my eyes open. "You gave me quite a scare," he said gently, taking my hand in both of his. He explained that after I passed out, he had to call an ambulance to bring me to the hospital where he volunteered. With a reassuring smile, he told me that the doctors had run some tests to make sure I was okay, but it seemed I had been hiding more from him than he realized. After a brief silence, he continued, his voice a mix of concern and curiosity, saying that he had looked into my treatment history at other hospitals but couldn't find any records for the past 3 years. Faced with this revelation, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. I knew it was time to share the truth about my battle with cancer. With a sad smile, I began to explain the reality of my situation to William. "To tell you the truth, I've faced many difficulties with treatment, mainly for financial reasons," I admitted, lowering my voice. I talked about the challenges I faced in my life, especially as a single mother, trying to balance treatment costs with daily living expenses. In recent years, I've sometimes had to make the difficult decision to postpone treatment to prioritize Brian's basic needs, I revealed, my eyes welling up with tears. William listened silently, his heart heavy with my pain and courage. When I finished speaking, he squeezed my hand more tightly, renewing his determination. He promised that I wasn't alone, that he would find a way to help with my treatment and ensure Brian and I received the support we needed. The sincerity in his eyes emphasized his resolve. The atmosphere in the hospital room was filled with complex emotions, but it began to soften with the honest confessions exchanged between William and me. Still feeling the weight of having hidden my situation, I looked at William with gratitude. William, I'm grateful for everything. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth from the beginning, I said, a modest smile playing on my lips. Everyone has their secrets, don't they? William returned my smile, a mischievous glint in his eyes. He said it was his turn to confess something, his voice filled with exaggerated excitement, piquing my curiosity even more. He hesitated for a moment, seeming to gather his courage. Then he confessed that the day he came to the library on time, he didn't actually need a book, he just wanted to create a chance to have lunch with me. I was surprised by his confession and felt my face grow warm. It made me happy to think that William had come up with such a creative excuse to spend time with me. A bit embarrassed, an odd smile spread across my face, and I lowered my gaze to hide the blush on my cheeks. That's unexpectedly sweet, I said, still smiling. And here I thought you were just a very serious student desperately in need of a book. William laughed, and I could tell he was pleased that his confession had brought a moment of lightness to me. He said, with a mix of sincerity and gentle teasing, that while he was indeed serious, that day he'd been completely focused on spending as much time with me as possible. Suddenly, a new worry gripped me, like a cold hand around my heart. What about Brian? I don't even know how long I've been unconscious, I asked, unable to hide my anxiety. William quickly reassured me, explaining that Brian was waiting outside with his father. Unfortunately, minors weren't allowed in this part of the hospital, but William assured me that Brian was okay and being well taken care of. I felt an immediate sense of relief knowing my son was safe and nearby. Even though I couldn't see him, Brian was always in my thoughts, like a constant melody playing in the background of my mind. The fact that William had made sure my son wasn't alone while I was unconscious meant more to me than words could express. It was then that William shared news that completely took me by surprise, like a bolt from the blue. He began by saying he had something else to tell me, his gaze serious but filled with cautious hope. He told his father about me, about how I'd helped him at the library and waited for him after closing. He continued, carefully watching my reaction, saying he'd also told his father about my situation and the difficulties I'd faced in continuing treatment. And then, he dropped the bombshell. He'd persuaded his father to financially support my treatment. I was speechless, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. The generosity of William and his family was beyond anything I could have imagined. Tears of gratitude and relief welled up in my eyes as I struggled to find the right words. I don't know what to say. This is unbelievable. I can't accept something so enormous, I murmured, my heart overflowing with gratitude. William smiled gently, enveloping my hand in his. He told me I didn't need to say anything, that he wanted me to accept this as a thank you for what I'd done for him. He and his family wanted to help me through this difficult time, he said. His voice held a certainty that wouldn't accept a no for an answer. The unexpected kindness from William and his family was like a ray of light in the darkness I'd been facing. For the first time in a long while, I felt a real hope for the future. Maybe things really can get better, I thought to myself. As William continued talking, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps miracles really do happen. With the unconditional support of William's family, I began treatment aimed at recovery. The journey was full of challenges, but ultimately led to victory over cancer. The years that followed were filled with deep joy and gratitude. Each day was a testament to the miracle I had experienced. William's initial kindness, which began as an act of supporting a friend in a difficult situation, blossomed into a deep and enduring love. After 3 intense years of treatment, William and I got married, surrounded by our friends and family. It was a moment to celebrate not just our love, but the life, struggles, hopes, and healing we'd shared together. You know, it felt like one of those perfect days you see in old movies, the kind where everything just falls into place. Despite the initial difficulties and the threat of dismissal, I was able to keep my job at the university, thanks to William's decisive intervention and the administration's renewed understanding of my situation. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, knowing I could continue doing the work I loved. The mystery of how my health condition came to light was finally solved. It turned out that a professor, who was close to the administration, had overheard my conversation with William at the restaurant and immediately reported it. Now, let me tell you, this breach of privacy didn't go unpunished. With the help of William's uncle, who was a lawyer, the professor was dismissed for inappropriate conduct. It was a real turning point for the university, strengthening integrity and fairness, and ensuring that personal privacy and respect were paramount. My son Brian, bless his heart, came to look up to William not just as a stepfather, but as a mentor and friend. William's positive influence was tremendous, encouraging the boy through hospital stories, discussions about medicine, and above all, his unwavering dedication to others. It was like watching a sapling grow into a strong tree under the right care. This guidance shaped Brian's path, inspiring him to pursue medicine like William, with a desire to help others as our family had been helped. My story, I suppose, is a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of support, and the transformative impact love can have on someone's life. I spent many happy years by William's side, celebrating each of Brian's successes as victories for our whole family. We became a beacon of hope, living proof that even in the most difficult situations, it's possible to find light, love, and new beginnings. Looking back now, I can't help but marvel at how life can surprise you, just when you think you've got it all figured out. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? My journey from a struggling single mother with cancer to where I am now feels almost like a fairy tale. But it's real, and it's a testament to the power of love, compassion, and resilience. Sometimes it comes in the form of unexpected kindness, like William's gesture that changed my life. Other times, it's the strength you find within yourself that you never knew you had. My story isn't just about overcoming illness or finding love. It's about the ripple effect of kindness, how one person's actions can transform not just a life, but generations to come. Look at Brian, now following in William's footsteps, determined to help others. There might be a William waiting to enter your life, or perhaps you're someone else's William, capable of changing a life with a simple act of kindness. After all, every ending is just a new chapter waiting to be written. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings you as much hope and joy as I've found in living it.
If this story has captured your heart, please show your support with a like. Your encouragement gives us the strength to continue delivering captivating stories almost every day. Don't miss out on the next wonderful story, which will soon arrive on your screen. We sincerely appreciate your support. See you again soon.